The first line of this book is, this is a book about reimagining power. And I really think that this is the central challenge for cities in Britain, and frankly for cities around the world. So for decades we've been saying, Center for Cities, Brookings, a whole bunch of other players, cities are the engines of national economies, cities are the centers of global trade and investment, the market wants, people want agglomeration, concentration, co-location, authenticity, vibrancy, vitality, the whole bit, right? This book basically says that cities are also the vanguard of problem solving in the world. Because there's been not just the cyclical moment, we have a narcissist sitting in our White House, that's the kind word of what I'll say about Donald Trump today. You have Brexit, we have the Catalonia secession, we have the alt-right emerging in Europe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this moment where there are a few nations, maybe France, maybe Canada, where the nation state seems to be semi-functional. And so sometimes when we think about cities emerging as the problem solvers in the world, whether it's social issues, whether it's economic, whether it's environmental, climate, we think, okay, maybe this is just a cyclical moment. You know, the nation state is becoming semi-dysfunctional. The city-state needs to elevate itself, right? I think what this book is about and what this moment is about is a structural shift. I think we're moving from a 20th century style of problem solving and nation building and economy shaping and talent preparing and placemaking, where it was top down, government led, and very compartmentalized, very specialized. You know, choose your topic. We'd have a Department of Transportation. We'd have a Department of Energy. We'd have a Department of Innovation. How could you possibly have a Department of Innovation? But that's a whole different topic. The 21st century is bottom up. It's led by cities. It's really designed and delivered by networks. These cities are not governments. They are not governments. They are networks of institutions and leaders from multiple sectors: public, private, civic, university, labor, environmental. The list goes on and on. And it is interdisciplinary at the core. Because if you say to a Department of Transportation, and this is still true in many parts of the United States, I think it's changed in this country, but if you say to a Department of Transportation, we have a traffic problem, widen the road, right? If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you say to a network of technologists and urbanists and housers and economic development people and a whole range of public, private, civic, et cetera, we have a traffic problem. They respond in a radically different way. There may be multiple routes, so to speak, to resolve the problem, at least mitigate the issue. And same for climate, and same for the opioid crisis, and same for homelessness, and same for early child education, and same for schools and skills, and it goes on and on and on. So what Jeremy and I started thinking about and then writing about was, if we are in a different world of problem solving, and if power belongs to the problem solvers, true power, the power to get stuff done, right? Just not debate and deliberate, but actually to change lives and change places. And if problem solvers increasingly concentrate in cities and conurbations, what are the norms and models that are emerging around the room, around the world, not the room, but maybe actually in this room, it's true, that we could capture and codify and then adapt and adopt. Not replicate, not take some great model coming out of Copenhagen and just plop it down, in Manchester, but adapt and adopt to different cultures and governance regimes and so forth. And our view of power was not governmental power. We said that right from the beginning. Because in a governmental power world, what all you are left with is, please, sir, give me more, to the higher levels, right? Devolve more, delegate more, don't hurt us, but please just give us more power. In a world where cities have market power and civic power, in addition to governmental power, suddenly there's a whole bunch of other opportunities that open up. You can go not just to your higher levels of government, But you can go to financial institutions, you can go to universities, you can go to corporations, you can go, depending on what the issue is, you can go to any number of sectors and, problem solvers and get them to engage with you. He says it doesn't just depend on that formal governmental power that's been delegated. I'll come back to this because I think this is a big meaningful lesson for this country where so much traditional governmental power is still centralized. So we went looking for norms and models, and whether we were right or not right, it's not entirely, it doesn't really matter, I mean, at the end of the day. But we chose Pittsburgh as a model for growth because it really bet on, it took risk, it had a networked approach to think about centers of excellence, advanced innovation, going back 30 or 40 years. Let's invest in robotics, let's invest in big data analytics, let's invest in machine learning, let's invest in autonomous vehicles. Before anyone even had words for these things, terms for these things, but let's invest in the future. So Pittsburgh is a really interesting model about growth that ultimately has the intent, still has to work on it, about being inclusive. For governance, we went to Indianapolis, because we wanted all our stories to be heartland stories for the most part. Any American story, we didn't want stories from the coast. We wanted places in the heartland who really feel like they're on their own. National government, like Elvis, has left the building. States, don't even get me started about American states. So, I mean, a place like Indianapolis, they knew the cavalry wasn't coming. And this was a story about business leaders, philanthropic leaders, university leaders, public sector, mayor, deciding, going back to the mid-70s, where, Kurt Vonnegut, I don't know how many people have heard of the great American novelist Kurt Vonnegut, grew up in Indianapolis. And he basically said, mid-1970s, it's a place where you go and play miniature golf for 364 days. And on the last day, you go to the Indianapolis Speedway. This was a boring place, right? So it bet on restoring the core. And it did it initially by building a whole bunch of sports facilities because it wanted to be the amateur sports center of the stratosphere. And then, in 1999, it decided we need to move from basketball to biotech. And they basically created the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. They capitalized it with a couple $100 million of private and civic wealth, no public, private and civic. And then they began to do, having stole the Baltimore Colts, our football team, American football, having stole the NCAA from Kansas City, they decided to start stealing faculty from all over the world to do what Indianapolis is really good at, which is life sciences. But this was a network governance model. 60 CEOs, they meet 4 times a year, they meet to decide not to discuss. To decide not to discuss and make investments in the future of their economy. And the last story we told was about Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, it's a wonderful place, people cycle, they're very healthy, they're strong, they're Vikings, right? This is the Viking sort of legacy. But there's a structure, there's a method to the madness in Copenhagen. Because Copenhagen 25 years ago was 18% unemployment, the place was fiscally bankrupt. And they decided we're going to have to bet in the future. Our version of a bet, their version of a bet, was to build a 21st century subway system. The only problem is they couldn't tax their citizens. So they had to think, and this is when it really gets helpful, very comparable to the situation we face. You've got to start thinking. How do we build a modern subway system without a kroner of taxes? Without a pound, without a dollar? Well, what they did is they took all the public land that was owned between the airport of the downtown and then ultimately along the harbor. They moved it under one publicly owned, professionally managed corporation, the Copenhagen City and Port Development Corporation. They said, we want you to regenerate the harbor and regenerate the Orested district, and all the yield has to go to service the debt on an infrastructure system. You can't have politicians coming in and robbing Peter to pay Paul, and oh, we didn't really mean we wanted to build a transit system, so let's take those kroners and move it somewhere. No, you have to basically regenerate the core to have a yield, revenue stream to service the debt and infrastructure. That's the public asset corporation. That's public wealth. So as we were basically going through these stories, we were getting, you drink your own Kool-Aid when you write a book. I mean, basically, anyone who wants to get very excited about the world, write a book. Because, it's just you, your dog, and your co-author. And the dog is happy that you're just home. So you've already won on that score. And your co-author, if you find the right co-author, you're headed for the mattresses. So, which is a Brooklyn term of, like, we're fighting, right? In France, it's the barricades, in Brooklyn, it's the mattresses. So we convinced ourselves after writing this book that cities have a lot of power. And we walk around, please national government, don't hurt us, or please national government, give us more power. The story's the same, right? But actually, when we think about it, we're the centers of the economy, centers of trade, all this sort of stuff. The question is, how do you convert, almost like a currency, that kind of market and civic power into real resources, right? Fiscal resources, financial resources, so that we can get stuff done, so that we can invest in the future. We can invest in innovation, we can invest in infrastructure, we can invest in our children, we can invest in inclusion. So a lot of what we wrote about was the notion that we have more, that we're not as poor as people make us out to be. Because in the US, cities, whenever you say cities, they think city governments. Oh, city governments, they're totally poor. They've got pension liabilities and these liabilities. No, these are the wealthiest places on the planet. We just have to change our mindset. So how do you begin to both have a, old term, paradigmatic shift, but then create the instruments, the intermediaries, the institutions for the 21st century? A lot of what we were thinking about as we wrote this book is that we're at the tail end of a post-World War II cycle where we built a whole bunch of institutions, either in the image of the national government, so those departments of transportation, energy, it just got repeated at the local level, or we built public authorities, that usually were given the remit to deliver state resources, right? And we, so the challenge we said to ourselves is, what of the next 5 years? I mean, we got another 3.5 years of this idiot in the United States. I mean, what do we possibly think could happen? Well, a lot of bad things could happen, but I mean, if anything good happens, it's a complete accident, right? So we have him, you have Brexit. I mean, we're in, this is not good, right? So what if we took the next 3 or 5 years? I mean, and this is not a thought experiment, this is actually what we want to do. And we build instruments, intermediaries, institutions in our image. Not in the image of the national government, in the image of cities, for cities, by cities. That's the challenge that we put before ourselves. So I wrote a couple things down about what this possibly could mean for Britain. And I did a blog for Center for Cities and LSE Business, and this is a couple thoughts. And then we can open up for conversation, and people can decide whether, now some people bought the book, you maybe want your money back, but go fight with Eurospam. Charlotte's over there. So the first thing I would say is, particularly in a Brexit world, your cities need more power. They need all kinds of power. Because the children have been running this country to some extent. I mean, and the adults need to take charge. And that's true really throughout large portions of the world. Anyone who put whether you should stay in the European Union to a vote of the public, that was crazy. I mean, it's like the United States deciding, let's ask everyone if we should be part of NAFTA. Or should we be part of the United Nations? Or should we be part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? Have you lost your mind? I mean, these are things that should be decided by a representative democracy through normal channels. They should not be put through a popular referendum. So cities need more power. They need more power because your cities are part of a global network of cities. Particularly your core cities, right, have enormous assets and advantages that were built up over centuries, right? And they really fit within a milieu of global trade and investment and global connections, universities, migrant patterns, all the rest of it. So the bit of power that you've been thinking about, which absolutely needs to continue, is to devolve power down from this higher level of government and just put that on steroids. There's not enough power that you can push down, starting from where you're starting from, where the central government keeps so much of it. right? In Whitehall, in London, right? In these agencies, in these, elected ministers. We got to push power down. That's the devolution debate. It has to happen. It has to happen faster. It has to happen across multiple tools and rules, right? But the other piece that we've been thinking about that would be relevant from an American perspective, which you can completely discard, is you've got to match devolution with evolution, right? And the evolution that you want to talk about is how to evolve a way of operating across public, private, civic sectors. That's what you want to evolve here. Because if we're going to basically thrive and prosper and sustain ourselves and be resilient when national levels of government have a frolic and detour, right? We've got to build the full power, the government, market, and civic power at this local level and at the conurbation level, right? So what that requires is several things, and these, I think some of these are already happening, but others could happen. A, your leaders need to exercise soft power. Soft power is just the power to convene, the power to pull together folks from different sectors, the power to cajole, the power to shame. Because any solution worth its salt in the 21st century is going to require different sectors to contribute their expertise and experience. So we have got lots of examples in the US of mayors, but also others, heads of philanthropies, heads of businesses, heads of universities, using their soft power to bring people into the room. We've got a homelessness problem. We got a housing problem. We got an opioid problem. We got to invest in our kids. You choose whatever problem you have. It doesn't really matter what the problem is. But it's got to be resolved by multiple stakeholders. So the power we want, the real promise of cities, is not just hard power. I'm in charge of this government agency, I'm in charge of this corporation. It's soft power. It's the ability to really enable collaboration. This is organized private wealth. We're good in the US at this, and this is the Indianapolis story, it's a St. Louis story, it's a Cincinnati story, it's a Pittsburgh story. It's how do you get wealthy individuals, corporations, philanthropies, universities, to actually say, we have to invest not for just ourselves, but for the greater good of the city, or the metropolis, or the region. It'll change, But how do we harness wealth? Because capital's not the constraint. And this is very much an American perspective. There's oodles of capital sloshing around. The challenge is connectivity, right? How do you take capital that's just sitting out there looking for certain kinds of returns, and how do you move it towards real impact, right? I'll come back just, there's a particular tax incentive that just passed in the United States that is going to make it easier for us to organize private and civic wealth. But it's really important as a second. The third piece is unlock public wealth. This is the Copenhagen example, this is the Hamburg example, this is the Hong Kong example. It's how do you take your public assets, particularly when you build infrastructure, right, which you do a lot of, and how do you ensure that that infrastructure and the wealth that it creates stays within the public realm through these smart institutions and smart mechanisms, and then gets reinvested for the public good. And then the last piece I would just say is, we can't just think about cities as individual places that each one of them is on their own, exercising and deploying and unleashing whatever market or civic power they have. How do we begin to think of cities as a collective? And I think what we've organized in the United States and what you've organized here are networks of cities that then go and lobby and advocate for at the national level, or maybe with the European Union when you were still hanging out with the Europeans, or maybe some other table, right? What we think is that we've got to get to a point, and the Swedes and the Danes do this to some extent, where cities come together and they work with global financial institutions, and they work with global technology companies, and they begin to aggregate their market power. And they basically begin to work with these institutions to design and deploy instruments that work for cities, as opposed to just being, at the tail end of a global institution, some American, some not, making decisions which might not work when they actually come to ground. So how do we exercise collective market power, right? And I think that's the next evolution. So for the next 3 or 5 years, I would say the challenge for British cities is devolution plus these elements of evolution. It doesn't mean you forget whatever Brexit, soft Brexit, hard Brexit, whatever the political discourse is, or what is your fight between the Tories and Labour or Democrats are involved. You have to be aware of what is happening at these higher levels of government, because when they really do go off the rails, a lot of damage can get done very, very quickly, right? So I regard higher levels of government as, yes, we want to resist, but most importantly, we want do no harm, right? Just do no harm. But while we're preventing the apocalypse from happening, what we've got to get about doing is really the kind of invention, innovation, both individual cities and collections of cities, both within Britain, within Europe, and across the world. We have to use this period to basically set up an architecture, just like the post-war period was used to set up a 20th century architecture in the United States, in Britain, and elsewhere. This is an urban architecture. It's a city-state architecture. And I think if we do our job right, what we'll end up with in the 21st century is 2 parallel and interrelated systems. One will be the system of nation-states, and one will be the system of city-states. And the 2 will come together when they have to, ignore each other when they don't. There'll be a lot of friction, clearly, because particularly in the US, with a lot of friction. But we will basically build a world order that has a multiplicity of levels and layers and complexity and all the rest of it. And that's, I think that's really our vision. It's messy. We don't totally know sometimes what the hell we're talking about. But it feels right. It feels like we've come to a point in the evolution of the world, urban age, metropolitan century, whatever we want to call it, where we really need to recognize and assert these different kinds of power, right? That's our proposition. So I'll just leave you with one thing about what I'm doing in my day job, though I'm not sure I really have a day job, but we had a big tax bill in the United States. And for the most part, what it really did was just shifted, cut corporate tax rates and shifted even more capital in the hands of private corporations and citizens in the US. So, and at the same time began to unravel Obamacare. So from a lot of perspectives, this was just bad governing, bad governance. But in that tax bill, there was a small provision called the Investment and Opportunity Act that was sponsored by Senator Cory Booker, a Democrat who was the former mayor of Newark, and Tim Scott, a Republican senator from Charleston, who had actually sat on the Charleston County Council. And it's a tax incentive which basically said, if you want to defer taxes on your capital gains in the United States, you can park them in what's called an opportunity fund, and that opportunity fund could invest in a distressed community. And the rules, it's the Trump plan, so God knows what the rules are. I mean, this is, it's America, it's the Wild West, right? And so a bunch of us, first of all, had to pick ourselves off the floor. They just did what? And there's really no constraints. And by the way, governors have to select the distressed areas according to certain criteria by April 20th. So right now, back in the US, a whole bunch of states are like scrambling and going, oh, what are going to be the areas, and mayors and county leaders and everyone's like, chipping in. This may be the largest economic development program in the history of the United States. It may be, but we don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that everyone's just making up as we go along. But what's really remarkable is that mayors all over the country and business and philanthropic allies and university leaders are going, this is our shot to basically create a market investment proposition for our places and for the distressed parts of our places. This is our shot to show investors, whether they're local, whether they're state, whether they're national, that we have assets that have been overlooked by the private sector, and we can couple those assets with investments in schools and skills and housing, and finally have a more integrated, comprehensive approach to neighborhood. So in this debacle, in this abyss of Donald Trump, there is this incredible opportunity to mobilize this market and civic power to make a market, to literally make a market, right? And connect capital to smart investment that works for places and work for people. So, only America, right? This is an incredible moment. So that's the overview of the book. That's some thoughts about what it might mean for this great country and your great cities. Happy to take any and all questions. And again, I thank Andrew and so many other people here for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Some of the challenges, but notwithstanding your pessimism of the national level, I think extreme optimism of what could be achieved, at the city level or at the local level. I think that's an encouraging thought to have. We hosted a group of US mayors just before Christmas to meet with some of our new UK mayors, and the mayor of Providence, Jorge Loza, gave a talk to those that were actually at City Hall, and he said in the US we have 3 political parties. He said we have the Republicans, we have the Democrats, and we have the mayors. And in the sense that difference between the ideology and the partisanship that happens in some places and the focus on pragmatism, problem solving, and delivery from our mayors. And I think that's a kind of nice and good and interesting way to kind of think about some of the challenges we've just laid out. So we'll do this in the usual way. We'll take some questions. I'll take 3 at a time, and then we'll get to Bruce to reflect on them. I'm going to start. I'm going to go 1 there, James 1 there, and I'm going to go 1 there. So keep your hand up if I point at you, because I won't remember. Just say who you are, James, and then I'll try to scribble them down, and then we'll get Bruce to reflect on it.
Thank you. James Stevens, Director of Cities at the Home Builders Federation. Thank you very much, Professor Katz. Look, I could appreciate that you're very unnerved by the way the populism goes across the world, and I can see why, and that's a theme amongst intelligentsia, and I can see why you would want to put devolution on steroids in order to limit the effect of the sovereignty of the expression of political will by the sovereign people. We can have a debate about whether that's progressive or not. Let's put that to one side. But I'm just saying that I'm not sure that even if you put devolution on steroids, the fixers, the problem solvers, would be immune from the expression of political will at the local level. And my example of that, which I'm starting to see across the country, is that actually the people are now starting to object to a lot of the policies of the fixers. And what you're proposing sounds very redolent of New Labour, towards an urban renaissance that would be the pragmatists, as Andrew said. But if you look in Manchester, there's a backlash now amongst momentum influence Labour Party. In London itself, there's a backlash against the kind of things that were before by James Pipe and Andrew Adonis, the emphasis of councillors of regeneration. So I just think you're possibly a little bit naive to think that and I would hope that actually the local expression will start.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yep. Can you check it's on?
Yes, seems to be. Alina Congreve from Climate Kick. That's kind of a related question about, in the cities that you've been doing your cases in, was there a greater level of public trust in the local governments as a result of their activities. And were more diverse from people standing for public office, so people standing for councils, people standing for mayors, were they not all old and male and white?
Very good. Yeah, you take the next one and then I'm going to come that in. So, after, yeah, go on.
So is
Say who you are.
Oh yeah, I'm Friedrich and I work in blockchain. I don't know. So is the too long didn't read of what you're saying? It's become Switzerland. And actually, have you read Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile? I see a lot of parallels in what you're saying here and what he said in that book, which I would say is quite a compliment. Thank you.
Okay. So, what happens if the fixers don't do what you ideally think they ought to be doing? How do we deal with those sorts of questions? Are we placing too much optimism in devolution and politics at the local level if they resist some of the things that we would ideally want to see them doing? I think that connects to a question about public trust, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, how we do that. And then, are you talking about Switzerland and Taleb's kind of notion of anti-fragility?
I think you're raising a lot of really interesting concerns, right? I do think that the nation state, and then we have two sovereigns, we have the nation state and our states, have become unbelievably sclerotic and compartmentalized beyond partisanship, and their ability to truly problem solve in ways that meet the complexities of the world in which we live has been dramatically minimized over the last 15 to 25 years. It's been exacerbated by partisanship, but having served at the national level in Washington under progressive leadership, I think we found it very difficult to actually break down the silos and the stovepipes and get to any kind of integrated, multi-level thinking. And the only solution we would ever come up with is let's just put more funding at the local level around integrated planning and visioning and implementation, because we can't do it at this level, right? Because at the national level, to get the Ministry of X to work with the Ministry of Y is an unnatural act between non-consenting adults. I mean, that's basically what we conclude. So I think I completely respect that could happen and what will happen with greater devolution, and it's true in the United States, is some places will basically be able to manage the politics. And these places are vastly different in terms of priorities and values and legacies. And some places will find the pushback to ultimately lead to, sort of an impasse and almost a stop, right? But I think in the end, the problem solving wins out. Because cities are like experiments, they're labs. And so if you have dozens and dozens of these things going on, I think the effective pragmatic problem solving happening in places that have will overwhelm those that don't. And then the ones that don't left is, why aren't we like that? Why don't, it's like 50 miles away, why aren't we like that? So, but we have to basically move to an interdisciplinary network world. We have to. That's the way the world works. It doesn't work in this top-down way anymore. So I accept it, and I think what you're raising are true concerns. Trust is fundamental. I mean, Brexit, Trump is about the loss of trust. It's about the loss of trust. It's fundamentally a large number of people basically are saying we have levels of economic insecurity and cultural anxiety, and those people don't hear us anymore, right? They don't hear us anymore. And therefore, just throw them all out and break whatever, the deal. So trust is fundamental. And I think the more trust you have in systems, the less rules you need, frankly. And the smarter institutions you can create, like in Hamburg or like in Copenhagen. Because I think trust in those systems is more deeply embedded. So we have to regain trust with the body politic. And I think the only way to do that is not by waiting for the charismatic leader. We have the charismatic leader. He's a demagogue. We have him. We just elected him, right? What we have to do is build thousands of leaders, thousands, tens of thousands of leaders at the local level to repair what is poisoning our systems right now. That's the only way to restore trust. I love Switzerland, I think. So anytime anyone said we want to be like Switzerland, I'm with you. But I haven't read that particular book. Now I feel like I have to read it. So.
One gentleman right in the back. And then I've got one down the front, two down the front. We can bring one of those down the front. Yeah, that gentleman. Yeah.
Vincent Goodstart with the Common Futures Network, which is a group of people who try to aspire to do what you actually have set out. My own position is that what you said, there is experience in this country of that being achieved, not in England but in Scotland, where the government did fragment it and they refused to be fragmented and came together in that collaborative way at a city level. And I think it's really powerful what you have to say, and something which we have to learn in the rest of the country, because England is a big black hole in that respect. But what is an elephant in the room in this is the difference between ourselves and the US, as I understand it, is that you're federal, you have a lot of power at the state and city level, and we are incredibly centralised, probably more centralised than anywhere else. And it's how you see that willingness to go way beyond what is at the moment just certain token gestures of devolution to actually being fundamental, and yet recognising that we are an incredibly densely occupied area where cities are interrelated, which almost collectively end up as one city-state. And it's that tension that you talk about of how we can address it and not wait for there to be a crisis in that city-state, nation-state conflict.
Okay, very good.
So my question is, we are a very centralised nation-state. This is a self-selecting audience of people, I suspect, who believe in devolution to cities. How do we persuade, how do you put political pressure on the Turkeys and central government to vote for Christmas and meaningfully devolve powers and resources to city governments in a way that's sustainable for those city governments, i.e. they can count on it being there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 100 years?
How can we persuade? Yeah, just yeah.
I'm Richard McCarthy, and now Capita, having played at the centre with this, as you know, Bruce.
Yes.
I'm kind of feel most persuaded by almost that note we just made a moment ago about less rules. And I'm slightly nervous that you're trying to impose a new set of rules. So one of the things that makes me nervous about your collective is that cities at the moment are all trying to outdo each other to look the same as the other one. And actually I hear a voice saying, stop trying to do that, take your own power and do your own thing. And if you remember the neat phrase from David Miliband, the double devolution story. So, avoid creating your brand new rule set in your cities. I think the difference about now in the 21st century is that people expect not to be told exactly what the solution is. And I'm afraid that comes to all those involved in politics. Those people who claim they are the saviours of the voice of the people need to make sure that they are indeed that. Because actually, really what I think people want is the space for things to happen and to evolve and change, and they don't like being told what to do. So we have to excite people. John's absolutely right, and I do completely accept we need to get politicians excited, by the way, that's what has to, they have to feel it's sexy to devolve power. Right, that's a really cool thing to do. But the other thing you have to do is to get people now to realise the power that they have. And you start with that, and I'd urge you to keep going with that. Because if you end up with a sense that we need to plead for power, you don't get on and use the power you already have.
Very good.
These are really great comments, and I do think that to a large extent, and this is why we, sort of talking about devolution and evolution, because I'm not sure whether, look, I'm all for accelerating the path to devolution. The question is whether, if you focused on this other part, can you organize private wealth? Can you really break down the differences between the sectors at the local level? Can you unlock public wealth? Can you move to a collective consortium that wants uniformity in certain kinds of instruments, but also customization, so places could recognize their own distinctive advantages? I think what we're saying is your ability to persuade higher levels of national government will be enhanced when you have even more market power, more civic power, more expression of problem solving at the local level, which is outside of the normal, the Ministry of X has this new program and yada yada, right? I mean, in a way, what we're basically saying to cities in the United States, for sure, is surprise us. Surprise us, right? They are completely out to lunch. And that's on a good day. On a bad day, they're trying to hurt us. On a good day, they're out to lunch. We hope they're out to lunch most days, right? I mean, literally, that's what we pray for in the United States. So the next 3 or 4 years is cities across the country, surprise us. You know, take us to a different place around dealing with housing affordability, dealing with homelessness, dealing with the reality of the violence in our neighborhoods, right? Dealing with the reality of opioid. I mean, the list goes on, and then the whole economic development system, right? And take us to a different place where solutions that maybe we could imagine that are iterative of what we're doing now, but some we can't even imagine right now, become the norm. And then when some sanity is restored to the higher levels of government, then we will go back to them and say, guys, while you are doing whatever you're doing up here, we actually have made some real progress. And here's what we need from you. Here's how we've decided your rules and tools and investments are too restrictive over here and could be opened up, or new resources could be brought to the table. I think we want to reverse engineer national policy. I think we want to spend the next 3 or 4 years getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and then go back up and then ask. I've seen this happen before, by the way, in the United States. LA did a transit referendum back in around 2009, and they raised about 30 years of funding. That was about $40 billion at the time to build out a transit system. They then, because the national government was completely sclerotic, went to the Chinese. When in doubt, go to the Chinese, right? And see if you can get a deal on low-cost financing to take your 30 years into 10 years. Couldn't get the deal done. So they went back to the national government and sort of frightened them by saying, we almost did a deal with China. Oh my God. You know, right? And then they passed this new tax innovative, transport innovative financing system where they got low-cost financing to take 30 years of funding into 10 years. So, but that was an example of a city and a county going from the local to the global, bypassing the nation state, in the end getting everyone excited, right? Irritated also, and then ultimately saying, okay, now that you're in the room talking to us as adults and not as the sovereign, here's what we want from you people. And we got the deal done. It was great, right? Since then, they also passed another referendum with $120 billion in one city and county in the United States, albeit 12 million people. $120 billion. Voters voted, build out a transit system. So I think I think the persuasion of national governments comes from power, right? First and foremost. We are not supplicants. We are not subordinates. We are the country. You work for us. We elected you to represent us. You can take this obviously in some, sit down some dark corners, but I'm really trying to get cities to define their power, assert their power, unlock their power. And the only other thing I'll say about cities is embrace failure. Someone is going to do something royally stupid, whether with national money, whether with local money, it's going to happen. It's the world. But so embrace it. Be able to, yes, set up some policing rules, but don't, suddenly start cowering. Don't give us any more power because we're going to screw it up. No, the essence of solving hard problems is to fail. So we have to build that also into this notion of city-led problem solving, or else everything just becomes hampered and circumscribed.
Let's take some more questions. One there, and then one right at the back. So that, yeah.
Hi, it's Tom Smith from the Cities and Local Growth Unit, or Turkey, as described by John, just in front of us. Just in terms of, I'm really interested in what you're saying about Copenhagen. So I'm sitting on a development corporation that's at the very beginning of a 20, 30-year plan.
Right.
What's the one lesson you got from that Copenhagen thing that you would say to me and the board who I kind of work with to get that long-term success regeneration?
Okay, we'll come to that. You've got a mic there, Charlotte. Back. Yeah, go on you. And then
Charlotte Aldrich, ex-Turkey turned devolution evangelist.
say a bit.
Charlotte Aldrich from the Centre for Progressive Policy. My question is, we talked about the challenge to government. How do we persuade big business in particular to get on board with this?
Very good. Yeah, Lee.
You're running for mayor of Pittsburgh or Indianapolis. I like miniature golf. I used to work for carriers making air conditioners. Now I work for Amazon loading warehouses. What's your pitch to me, Mayor?
Thank you very much, Lee. Right, one lesson from Copenhagen, Tom can take back to his board. How do we get big businesses involved? And I think you're thinking more than a little bit of the slush money that comes out at the end of it when it's got 50 pence and you have to have a logo everywhere. It's not that you're talking about, I think, Charlotte. And then Lee, you're the mayor.
Yeah.
Miniature golf everywhere, surely. Free.
So I think the genius of the Copenhagen system is by saying that the yield from the management of the assets and the disposition of the assets had to go to service the debt on an infrastructure project, a major infrastructure project. So whenever someone would come in and say, and they're Danish, so this doesn't happen, but the brother-in-law of my cousin wants us to really focus on let's sell that property at less than market price. The answer was, we are servicing the debt on a modern subway system. Did you not get the message? So the question is, this is not just about smart regeneration. This is about the smart yield from asset management, right? That then goes to reinvest for the public. Right now, in some cities, that might be infrastructure. It depends on your system as to whether it's infrastructure. In other cities, I've said to mayors, maybe this is your pool to invest in young children. Kids are cheap compared to building a transit system. So maybe there's enough yield from managing your public assets in a smart way where you can actually invest in kids ad infinitum. And we all know that that's the gift that keeps on giving, right? So I would try to declare the vision about the use of the yield in very concrete and specific terms, and I would keep it to like one thing. Because once you start doing we could do this and do this and do that and do this, it's not tight enough. And then you're not going to be able to sustain it. Big business, it's all about self-interest. It's all about, it depends on which kind of company you're talking to. But, we have so many examples in the United States of corporations that took risk and are now looking like geniuses, right? Because they went into distressed cities or distressed parts of cities and were able to really, and these were places that were unpopulated. So if anyone starts saying, the gentrification, we're talking about downtown Detroit. You take a rock out at 11 o'clock in the morning to throw it, you wouldn't hit anyone. So I mean, the rebirth of Detroit is a marvel that's privately led and civically led. So I think what in a world of, and this is the challenge between short-termism and long-termism, because these folks are dealing mostly with, if they're publicly held, with quarterly statements. And we're talking about 5, 7, 10-year returns, right? Or thinking about patient investment. But if you really want to, make returns that will make your shareholders happy and whomever else owns the company, then, engaging with cities is about competitive edge. It is not about philanthropy. It is about competitive edge. And that means you've got to make an investment proposition to these people. And the last thing I would say about mayor and, all that bit. At the end of the day, what we need to do is equip our citizens with the skills they need to navigate in an incredibly disruptive century. It's happening so fast at a crazy pace, and we've got to start literally at the earliest ages. I mean, we've got to take whatever the curriculum is, whatever the rule, we've got to blow it up. I mean, we are not equipping people with the skills they need to succeed, right? And so we may be focusing a lot on the labor demand side often, but we're not really thinking through radical risk on the supply side, right? With early childhood education that moves right into, accumulating smart investments. So I think a lot of what we focus on as the cell, right, is around, and this is really what touches people, is we're going to create a quality place that will feel like, that where everyone belongs, inclusive placemaking, right? Because people really feel connected to place. Even in a mobile society like the United States, you want to believe that this is authentic, different, and that's doable because we're so large. And then we want to invest in, children, young adults in ways where we are expressing our values. Now, will everyone support that? Of course not. A whole bunch of people will be thinking, well, I don't want this. Well, you don't need everyone. Perfect is the enemy of the good. You need enough to get stuff done. But I think whichever city can say we're building a quality place and we're building the workforce of the future and we're doing it in ways which right now may seem, like Pittsburgh when they invested in robotics, is completely insane. But this is the kind of risk we need to take. I think you can bring the populists along for that. I really think they want a vision for the future.
Okay. Let's take a couple more, and then we'll be done. Got one at the front, Simon. Got a lady.
Access to funding that you now have in the States. Can we have a different picture of the future that you painted, which also includes that level?
Yeah, sure. Great.
Okay, so Elena fears that we're not citizen-oriented enough. Bruce?
Yeah, so...
Sorry, Chris, go on.
Yep.
Last question.
Thanks. Yeah, Chris Murray from Coal Cities. Bruce, we've got very used to arguing for devolution in this country on the basis of outcomes. So we see devolution as a process rather than an end in itself.
Yeah.
But the question is about whether you think that actually there is merit in seeing it as an end in itself, that you're saying something almost more fundamental about the role of the civic in relation to the state, that you should have those powers actually almost as a kind of moral function of morality, really.
Yeah.
And also about the burden of proof that is put on us to argue the case for devolution. So, if you tried for murder in this country, actually the burden of proof is flimsy compared to arguing the case for a minor accounting function to be involved. Sometimes that can be how it feels.
Okay, so 2 questions around citizenship, the role of the citizen and individual, and then actually, are we thinking about devolution power as an end in itself, not just as a means?
So I would say that a lot of the examples of new localism in the book, and they're in various chapters, start at the block level and at the neighborhood level, and it's participatory democracy, taken to an extreme, particularly in our most distressed places, where the cavalry, the national cavalry is not coming, the state cavalry is not coming, and frankly, a lot of the local cavalry wasn't coming. So people at literally the block level had to take responsibility and agency. So that's the thing about new localism. It acts at all these different levels. The players change, the stakeholders change, the leaders change. But it's like a multiplicity of leaders. It's not the hierarchy, it's the network. And depending on which geography you're at, the network, right, shifts. I would say with regard to citizens, I think what we want to do is move to a system beyond citizen engagement to true citizen empowerment. And I would say the best example of this is probably Helsinki, where they are really testing technology, because it's an incredibly technologically sophisticated place, but they're using various kinds of technology. Citizens are using technology to be part of problem solving, particularly around climate, but that covers many different sort of avenues. I mean, climate is the classic system approach, right? Because you got transport, you got building, you got energy, you got individual consumers, you got large polluters, you got, So I think Helsinki is trying to basically catapult itself to be the head of citizen empowerment and move beyond citizen engagement. And citizen engagement still sort of reflects back on government. And citizen empowerment more is about the civic power that our citizenry is. And I think we are trying to move to a flipping of the pyramid, really, in our societies. I mean, I think this hierarchical notion, because we're taught from an early age. I mean, this is a generational thing, but when I grew up in the U.S., on Saturday morning we would have cartoons, and we would have some educational cartoons, and most of them were about Washington, D.C., and a bill on Capitol Hill, and how laws get made, and the president, I mean, it was just, we were like brainwashed to believe in hierarchy, And I think we're trying to have problem solving reflect the way we live our lives. We don't live in a hierarchy, we live in a network. We live in a community, we live in a city, we live in a, we move beyond these very hard borders that government has set in the 20th century. So, the end product for me is the flipping of the pyramid. The city, the community, is at the top of the pyramid. The nation state is to serve the community in the city, right? That is true representative democracy. And devolution is just ipso facto, like what has to happen as part of the service. You want to have platforms set. We always call our national government a health insurance company with an army. So, we want a safety net, we want certain basic things that only the nation state can provide. But it's in the service of us. And I think that's the mental shift that has to happen in the 21st century. That's true representative democracy and actually true participatory democracy. So it's going to take us a bit to get there because, the people we've elected to national government actually think they run things. They don't run things. They don't. We run things. And that's the big shift that has to happen.
Fantastic.